Hello and welcome to your tropical weather outlook valid of the 7th of August 2022. We're looking at the entire tropics around the world because activity is incoming, but kicking it off with the Atlantic Basin where it's going to awaken from its slumber with the first tagged area of interest since July 13th. So it's been nearly a month since our last activity on the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook from the National Hurricane Center, with a 0% chance of development in the next 48 hours. However, a 40% chance of development in the eastern tropical Atlantic from this disturbance over here. A tropical depression could form by the early to middle part of next week as per the National Hurricane Center's forecast. I reckon this is inevitable to happen at this stage. It's looking very likely that this will occur. It's not looking like an investor attackable area of interest. It's basically just a tropical wave coming off the coast of Africa right now. However, as it gets into the more middle part by around 20 to 30 degrees west, we will likely to see some tropical storm characteristics develop into this system, and we'll take a look at that later on in the model runs. Let's move over to the Eastern Pacific because we have tropical activity over there. Tropical Depression 9E has been tagged here. Tropical storms, some people are saying. The next name on the list is Howard. However, I don't think it's going to be reaching Howard for at least the next 6 hours or so. It's not looking too great, but it's also not looking terrible. We're expecting a mid-range to high-range tropical storm out of this system. No watches or warnings current. It's a pretty easy track to forecast as per most Eastern Pacific systems. National Hurricane Center not having any troubles with this storm. They're expecting a peak of 65 miles an hour. Is that lowballing? Probably. Multimodal diagnostics calling for more sort of a hurricane strength peak out of this system. However, at this stage, there's no justification to expect a category or strong category 1 or stronger out of this system. And as the National Hurricane Center has said, it's really only got the next 2 to 3 days to strengthen before it encounters more unfavorable environment conditions early next week. Let's go jump and take a look at the Central Pacific because after well over 1,000 days of inactivity, we could be seeing a tropical storm there. The National Hurricane Center has a 40% chance of development over there. Here it is. The 40% chance of formation in the next 5 days. It's a 0% chance in the next 2 days. However, an area of low pressure could form well southeast or south of the main Hawaiian Islands on Monday or Tuesday, and environmental conditions could allow for some gradual development of this system, and a tropical depression could form as it moves quickly westward over the Central Pacific during the middle part of next week. So this is a strong tropical wave that they're expecting. It might even close off into a tropical depression or tropical storm. GFS has other ideas for the system, turning this into a hurricane around here, and then as it crosses the international dateline, which is right here, it gets up to a very strong typhoon and quite north as well. So that's one we'll take a look at as well later on in the video. Let's take a look at what the conditions are around the world right now. It's important that we also take a look at the La Nina, El Nino, the Nino 3.4 index. Right now that's sitting at a negative 0.622, which is 3/4 of the way to a full-blown La Nina. I'm expecting this to reform into a La Nina maybe just by around late August, early September, which is bad news for the Atlantic. But the Eastern Pacific, it seems to be thriving off this stuff right now. We're even ahead of a normal season in the Eastern Pacific, and keep in mind the Eastern Pacific was meant to be kept at a very low amount of activity this year. There's been 10 tropical systems move through the basin out of a predicted only 12. So the Eastern Pacific could get to 15, maybe 16 tropical systems this season. It will likely, however, slow down by around September. We're in peak season right now for the Eastern Pacific, so it's nothing unusual. It's just quite unpredicted for this time of the year. Let's take a look at the North Atlantic sea surface temperatures because that's certainly the part of the world getting the most interest right now. You can see significant sea surface temperatures in the subtropical and tropical latitudes of the Atlantic. Take a look at this, up to 40 degrees north. We're looking at 29, 28 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures, and even further north on the latitude of sort of Long Island, we're still looking at 28 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures up here. So the Gulf of Mexico piping hot. The only issue is this sort of area around here where the Azores High is sort of located. Sea surface temperatures quite cool, but it's very rare to see strong tropical cyclones move through this area. Gulf of Mexico is going to have a birthday party this season. The Caribbean as well looking very warm indeed, and the tropical Atlantic also looking very warm and spicy, and that's where our next tropical wave is going to be moving through here, maybe skirting the top of the 28 degree isotherm, and we could be seeing a pretty strong system out of that up towards hurricane status. However, with all early season storms, don't expect something too massive out of it. It's sort of the September storms that you'd be worried about in the open Atlantic basin. That's not the only place in the world making news. We'll take a look at the Eastern Pacific briefly and then go and jump into the Western Pacific because that is piping hot. Take a look at the Eastern Pacific here. There's been a lot of storm activity down towards the southern parts in the more deeper tropics just offshore from Mexico and this sort of area. Thus, sea surface temperatures are a little bit lower than what you'd expect, around 29 degrees Celsius, 28 degrees Celsius in some areas. But just look, just offshore from Mexico, 30 to 31 degrees Celsius. That's prime time for storms to move through the area, and it's not something you see typically in La Nina years, that's for sure. Matching the Gulf of Mexico sea surface temperatures there, so very, very warm indeed. Out into more the open tropical Eastern Pacific, it's a little bit cooler, but that's what you'd expect generally in La Nina years, especially with this very strong current moving down the eastern coast of the United States. So again, the Eastern Pacific is surprising a lot of people, that's for sure. Brief look at the Central Pacific, that's certainly primed and ready to go for tropical activity. You can be seeing there 26 degrees Celsius sea surface temperatures where the storm is expected to form, if it does form, and then up towards the international dateline, sea surface temperatures approaching 29 degrees Celsius up to 30 degrees north. So again, that's prime time for tropical storms to move through that area and intensify. But the Western Pacific is the area getting all of the attention around the world right now with sea surface temperatures. Just when is it going to start throwing storms? Because this is concerning stuff indeed. Pockets of 32 degrees Celsius now seen in the northern parts of the Philippine Sea, 30 degrees Celsius all through the Philippine Sea. This is really concerning stuff. If you're to see storms move through sort of this pocket of 30 degrees Celsius waters, the explosive intensification is almost guaranteed in a low shear environment, and that's where we see storms like Hagibis form. And if we're to see storms move through a little bit like Solar of 2015 towards Taiwan, or up north towards China like Lekima of 2019, or even up towards Korea and southern Japan, we could be seeing Category 4, Category 5 strength systems move through the Ryukyu Islands. So the Ryukyu Islands certainly on watch. This is bathwater type stuff in the open Western Pacific at this time. Philippines as well, right in line for strong storms. Just had a fantastic discussion in my Discord server. Join it, there's a link in the description, about how primed the Philippine Sea is for tropical activity. Very concerning stuff indeed, and we could be seeing some very strong storms later on in the season. And this is in a La Nina year as well, which generally isn't the best for the Eastern Pacific. The most active seasons typically lie in El Nino years. However, at this time, very, very, very warm indeed. So, concerning stuff from the Western Pacific perspective, that's for sure. Let's take a look at sea surface temperature anomalies. I'll just take a world view right now, just to keep things plain and simple. The open Western Pacific, about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average in most areas. Pockets approaching 5 degrees Celsius above average. So that's very, very warm indeed. That's not stuff to mess around with. The Eastern Pacific is a bit hit and miss. Warmer than average waters offshore from Mexico, but generally average to below average in the tropical Eastern Pacific. The Atlantic as well, pretty hit and miss in some places. Caribbean is a little bit below average in places. The Gulf of Mexico definitely warmer than average across much of it. Subtropical Atlantic much above average. The main development region as well, quite significantly above average. So really around the world, significantly above average sea surface temperatures at this time. Now I did promise multimodal diagnostics, so let's take a look at Tropical Depression 9's multimodal diagnostics page. We'll take a look at what the models are expecting this storm to get to. GFS calling for a hurricane strength system, in fact more sort of looking at up towards Category 2 status. In fact, the D-ship, the second highest of the intensity models, up towards tropical storm status, and then the models a little bit hit and miss. Low range tropical storm, maybe up to high range tropical storm, but yeah, really not calling for much in the way of intensification, and that's because sea surface temperatures by around day 2, day 3 drop off a cliff. Wind shear remaining moderate for the rest of the storm's life, and mid-level humidity around that Goldilocks zone of around 70%. So overall conditions hit and miss for the storm. Not too bad, but again, not too flash. Taking a look at Invest 97W in the Western Pacific. This one's just in the, I believe it's called the South China Sea. Yeah, it's in the South China Sea. The multimodal diagnostics plot is quite a funny one, that's for sure. HWF calling for a typhoon out of this system. However, most of the other models calling for a brief tropical storm, maybe tropical depression even from this system. It's expected to do loop-the-loops, however, so that'll be interesting to see, that's for sure. It's going to take a while for it to wrap itself up properly, but at this time, it's got a decent shot of becoming something tropical. Wind shear will be quite high for the storm, around 10 to 20 knots, which is quite bad for these large systems. Sea surface temperature is not a problem in the world, and mid-level humidity as well might get in the way, but still overall not that bad. Invest 99W is in the open Western Pacific, I believe. No multimodal diagnostic plot, but it isn't really expected to become anything there either. Let's take a look at the forecast models as well. So taking a look right now at a satellite viewer of Tropical Depression 9. If we were to take a look at forecast models as well, we'll jump into what the ECMWF has to say. So the ECMWF here not really calling for much in the way of strong intensification with Tropical Depression 9. I believe it really only takes it to tropical storm status and then sort of just kills it off after that by around Wednesday or so. Might get it up towards mid-range tropical storm status, but after that you can see another broad area of low pressure developing in the Eastern Pacific. Does it get there? Not really. It really tries to make a go of it, but it never really succeeds. Let's move over to the Central Pacific because that's getting quite hot as well. By around Tuesday you can see a low pressure system trying to form here and a low pressure system trying to form there. Now I believe that's 10 degrees north, so quite far south there. However, not too unusual, that's for sure. You can see it start to wrap itself up quite nicely by late Wednesday into Thursday. But yeah, the ECMWF really doesn't give this storm much of a shot. It does take it into the Western Pacific as well. Might get to tropical storm status there, but this is sort of going really long range by around day 10. The GFS is the interesting one here, calling for quite a strong system to materialize. Let's try and get a bit of a view of the Eastern Pacific as well, so you can see Tropical Depression 9 over there. By Monday, Tropical Depression 9 approaching hurricane status, mid-range tropical storm status at least south of Baja, California, and by Tuesday definitely a hurricane and then start a weaken at a 963 millibar pressure, so that could get quite strong. However, I don't know how accurate that's going to materialize out to be. So here's a look at the two Central Pacific systems. I believe that might just be in the Central Pacific. Yeah, very, very tight that will be. That might get an Eastern Pacific name depending on when it forms, if it does form, but then you can see over here a look at the tropical storm trying to form there. If that does form, that will get the name of Hone. If this one does form, it will get the name of Iona, depending on what order these systems form in. But the GFS really giving what could become Hone quite a good shot. We can end it off by Sunday and then up in towards the deeper subtropics of the Central Pacific and then into the Western Pacific. Yeah, this is in the Western Pacific here, up to around 30 degrees north. We're looking at a probably near typhoon strength system, and then another tropical storm here around Baja, California by early next week. But again, this is quite long range at this time. Let's jump over to the Atlantic. The ECMWF isn't saying anything for the Atlantic, but the GFS certainly is. So by Wednesday, we can see this tropical wave move into the tropical Atlantic, the main development region. By Thursday, wraps itself up into a tropical storm, nearly gets to hurricane status, actually. Gets very close to hurricane status, and then weakens off by Sunday and then into Monday, and really is a barely traceable low pressure. But after that, the storm moves up into the deeper subtropics and tries and makes a go of reforming up there. But I think that's just the long-range GFS being incredibly weird, that's for sure. Now, the Western Pacific has got some rumbles going as well. By sort of around Wednesday, we could be seeing a strong tropical depression rather, move into southern parts of China near Hong Kong. A lot of systems moving through there. Could be a Chaba type system, maybe just a bit weaker. By Thursday and Friday, the quieter picture takes shape, but again, Gulf of Tonkin trying to fire up another storm here into the South China Sea, and then by next weekend we could be seeing a strong tropical storm move up towards China as well, and maybe even into Taiwan. But after that, nothing really happens in the open Western Pacific. Let's see what the ECMWF says. Again, yeah, nothing much happening in the Eastern Pacific, in the Central Pacific, Western Pacific rather, as I stumble on all of my words over there. So yeah, generally speaking, it looks like we're moving into a more active phase. It's just a lot of uncertainty is lying with where the storms could be going. So yeah, that basically does it for the tropical weather outlook. Please do subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy this video. It really does help out. And if you do want to see more content like this, please do consider throwing a like to the video and tell me in the comment section down below. But that's all from me. I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.